Prince Devitt was a very hot commodity in the early 10s. He had a tremendous upside at such a young age. WWE did see enough in him to warrant a signing, however it didn't materialize and the Prince continued developing himself all around the world. He was a great junior heavyweight champion in New Japan and already he had the big guys coming after him, but after his next run, they were lunging at the chance to sign him. Prince Devitt turned heel and formed a great group by the name of Bullet Club. He worked very hard on improving his personality, added face paint to his look, and overall he was a complete package. The face paint in particular made it seem like he was going to war and unlocked another financial incentive for WWE to sign him, because the kids love face paint. Prince Devitt's Bullet Club was entirely different to the later version. It felt cool and untouchable. He laid the groundwork for the group to take over the world, and I always say that I wish to make an entire video on the beginning, but TV Asahi wouldn't like it. It kinda irritates me because New Japan is a promotion with a rich history behind it. It's unfortunate, but as we say, it is what it is. Devitt's time in New Japan was a time of self-reflection, especially the last year, because he really invested in himself and in turn made his chances at being a success in WWE much higher. WWE was focusing hard on NXT at the time and in turn, it led to their philosophy undergoing a major change. They were looking into him as far back as 2009, but rumors were being heard in August of 2013 about Prince Devitt signing with WWE. William Regal was a strong supporter of the Irishman and was vouching for him every chance he got. This story would intensify over the next couple of months, and after Devitt's final match on April 6, 2014, New Japan announced his departure. It was a slow process for him to sign due to the visa situation, but he finally did on July 28th and was set to report to NXT. He was a part of that core group of the new era: Kenta, Kevin Owens, Pac, and Sami Zayn. Their potential was great, and I remember thinking Kenta, Hideo Itami, would be the guy due to his international reputation. With that said, Hideo Itami was being attacked and stalked by the Ascension for multiple weeks on NXT. He had no help for a while, but was still fighting back. When these two were too much to handle, he brought in a friend, Prince Devitt. The name popped up on the screen before transitioning into Finn Balor. The commentary team did a good job in hyping up the Prince, and in the ring the duo overpowered the former tag team champions and sent them running. Good first impression. His in-ring debut came the following week and he introduced himself to the crowd. He said that he was in NXT because he was a future before Tyson Kidd interrupted. This is when he developed a catchphrase and wore those headphones. It doesn't feel so long ago, but the time doesn't lie. This was actually 8 or 9 years ago, which is strange. He claimed Balor lacked heart and Justin Gabriel followed up trashing him. This is some stuff from my career, I swear. He's out here saying we're gonna show how far from the top you are and the crowd's chanting who are you at him. This is a my career moment right down to the interruption from Hideo Itami. Only thing missing is a heel turn. They had a tag team match which was just Finn Balor wrestling on rookie mode. Yeah, sure, they gave him a bit of a tough time. We all knew how this was going to end. The Ascension meanwhile sent them a message acting all serious and angry, and the reason why I'm not taking it as a big deal was because after this, they became jobbers. The duo went after Balor in his singles match debut and it led to the locker room clearing out trying to separate them. All Balor had to say about this was that he was going to bring something that Connor and Victor never saw. He summoned a demon. This was insane at the time because number one, that face paint was ridiculous. But on the other hand, it also unlocked another dimension to this Finn Balor persona. What I mean is, Prince Devitt was already hyped up for simply being his plain self. I came to NXT to wrestle. That alone was going to take him far in the year of 2014, yet they followed up on his New Japan Pro Wrestling face paint and gave it an entire character that's hidden within him. It wasn't an entirely supernatural character, but something that even Balor himself feels terrified to channel. That's what it was. And this would continue to develop over the next couple of months. Hell, I wouldn't even say the demon that you guys know was there until his feud with Samoa Joe, if I had to say. So there was a lot of potential. The match saw the heels dominate Itami, but the moment Balor went in, it was GG's, game over. They won the match. Storyline wise, he didn't even need the demon because these two were 67 overalls cosplaying as 84 overalls, but he just wanted to flex on him with the face paint. Simple match, it was nothing special. They beat him in the rematch as well to move on. For Balor, his goal was to become the NXT champion. He was inserted into a tournament for the chance to face the champion Kevin Owens. He faced Hideo Itami in the semi-final. Was this a shock to the Prince? No, he knew that it was going to come down to this. Itami told him that if he had to take him out to win the title, he'll do it. It's strange how this match wasn't on TakeOver because it was huge. Both men wrestled very rough and rigged. I mean in aggression, of course. It was a style of Japanese. Balor won it here by force, and he barely scored the victory to face Adrian Neville in the finals. The Demon was brought back, and this is the thing. The commentary didn't really see it as a change of character. It felt like Balor was wearing it as war paint. They wouldn't acknowledge it as a different entity until, as I said, I believe the Kevin Owens or Samoa Joe feud. This match at TakeOver Rival was awesome. NXT was on a roll at this point. It was like they could do no wrong. Balor and Neville had a point to prove, especially Neville, who was on his way out. This gave Balor a title shot against Kevin Owens. The champion was ready for just about any challenger and told Balor to prepare for the challenge ahead. One thing both men had in common was that they fight for prizes. Of course, Owens, it's a bit different with him. You know, he claims he fights for prizes. He's a prize fighter, but destroys everybody in sight. This was a very tough challenge for Finn Balor. It was a good match. Owens targeted his knee, slowed down the pace, and basically, once he targeted the knee, he couldn't really do much about it. He did hit the coup de grace eventually, but it wasn't to the fullest, which basically cost him the match. Good stuff, but we all know that the best work was ahead. Following this, the Prince had a great rematch with Hideo Itami for a spot in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. The time was limited, but both men really made the most out of it with some chain wrestling, fast-paced and intense action, but in the end, the knee, at least that's what it looks like, was enough to seal the deal with Hideo Itami scoring the victory. Really some great stuff. This type of action wasn't entirely foreign to the main roster, especially in the year of 2015, but you can see that they had a very long leash on them here compared to the main roster. They were free to do just about whatever they wanted. From here, Finn Balor developed a feud with Tyler Breeze. He expressed jealousy over Finn Balor's status and held him as a flavor of the month type. This soon involved Hideo Itami because the NXT Championship match was up for grabs, and drama would unfold between the two friends after Itami accidentally struck the Prince. Tyler Breeze took advantage of this ongoing drama on 2 occasions. The 3 men were set to face off at TakeOver Unstoppable, and there was high hopes for this match. However, Itami suffered a legitimate injury and was written out. I believe it was all set up for him to win the title at Beast in the East initially. It was also strongly alluded to Kevin Owens being the perpetrator. So this made the triple threat a singles match, and these two were hungry as hell. The Demon was back, and once again, it was good. Problem is, these matches always get overlooked, because later that night, Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch had one of the greatest women's matches I've ever seen in WWE. It was that damn good. It's probably in my top 3 women's matches for WWE. With that said, Tyler Breeze in 2015 was a baller. The main roster really makes you forget the aura and confidence this man had, and I'm not saying he's a mega star or anything like that, it's just he was pretty damn good. And when the bell would ring, he always went hard. The Demon was in his element here and emerged victorious, all while Kevin Owens had a disappointed look on his face. It was going to be a homecoming for the Demon because Finn Balor's title match was set to go down in Tokyo, Japan on July 4th. He was more than excited about this, even knowing very well who Kevin Owens is, a dangerous individual. However, Finn Balor was confident with the Demon by his side. In the meantime, he had to deal with the man-beast Rhino. His intentions was to get down to the future Starks and take them out before they could even get started. Rhino more than held his own. He gave the #1 contender a tough time, and even when he managed to overcome this challenge by a roll-up, Balor ended up taking a gore on the stage. The feud continued, but on the side, WWE showed what the Demon King was truly about. A video package about Balor's friendship with Albert and his return to his stomping grounds. As for the Demon, he was the innate spirit of what Finn Balor was truly about. They were giving more context about this character, and it was more fleshed out than compared to the previous months where he just wore face paint as a way of mind games. Another thing to mention is that it wasn't a cartoony character like the main roster, it was just a different state of mind, and that would continue to be more of a focal point for his character in NXT as time went on. He beat Kevin Owens in tag team action, but the champion still had his doubts over a fairy tale ending. It sounded too unimaginable for it to actually happen in his eyes. Finn Balor brought out the Demon at Beast in the East. Balor was very intense and aggressive early on. Kevin Owens here was posing, showing off, and he wasn't taking the match as serious as he should have been early on, but of course that changed. The action here was much better, the atmosphere was great, and everyone wanted Finn Balor to win. Everyone. Both men stole the show and gave the best match of Beast in the East. The Demon's homecoming was a success, and he ended up becoming the NXT champion in the end. He even got an endorsement from John Cena afterwards. From here, it only got better for Finn Balor because WWE positioned him as the main guy, the face of NXT. He returned to Full Sail on the July 22nd, 2015 episode of NXT to discuss his victory. Balor was extremely joyous over this victory and expressed gratitude. He was very appreciative of the road to get to the title, and in particular was proud of making that decision to go to NXT. All of those decisions were worth it the moment he won this title. When asked about his rematch against Kevin Owens at TakeOver Brooklyn, he had plenty of praises for Kevin Owens and also acknowledged his mean streak. It was a tough challenge ahead, but he was confident of his chances. KO at this point was on his way out. It was well known because somebody who beats John Cena clean wasn't going to stick around in NXT. They had the contract signing later that night, and with a sound of jealousy in his voice, Kevin Owens asked him, how does it feel to defend the title in the biggest main event in NXT history? The fans were pissed that the show was in Brooklyn, and he laid out the match and asked Balor about being the underdog despite being champion. He was ready to take out Finn Balor and called Japan a fluke. The champion was eager to make all of those promises go down Owens' throat, and the match was official. KO took advantage of this, assaulted William Regal, and as he goes to the pop-up powerbomb, Balor retaliates and sends him running. Now, Kevin Owens always had the excuse of providing for his family as the reason why he does what he does. Balor didn't see it that way completely. As angry as he was at him though, he was very careful to realize that Kevin Owens shouldn't be taken for granted. And about the ladder match, Balor was willing to do anything to prove that Tokyo wasn't a fluke. He also teased the appearance of the Demon. Owens tried to attack him the following week, and after a rough battle, actually succeeded. This set up an intense affair for the final episode of NXT before TakeOver Brooklyn. It was still unknown if Balor would bring out the Demon. Brooklyn sucks chant loud and clear in the arena. Kevin Owens decided to take advantage of this to trash the fans for being hypocritical. He hated these fans for being ungrateful and said that he was eager to beat their flavor of the month, Finn Balor, in front of a crowd that deserves to see NXT. And the Kevin Owens he's facing is an entirely different person, somebody he's never seen before. His ego is getting the best of him here. The NXT title was simply a way of showing he's better than Finn Balor and he could flex on the fans. That's all he wanted. He just wanted to make fun of the fans, show them what he's got in his hand, and do what he does. It wasn't really a big deal to him to win that title. It was more so about being petty and proving that he's better than Finn Balor. All this talk of sending Balor on a stretcher quickly went away after the champion came out and a brawl ensued. The champion sent him running and said that he's gonna shut his mouth. No mention of the Demon. Simple build. There's not more they could have done because Kevin Owens was leaving. There was no chance of him winning, and I'm assuming the only reason why he was here was because they needed a huge main event to sell out the arena. It was the first time NXT was going outside of Full Sail, and a main event with Finn Balor and Kevin Owens, a ladder match, was gonna sell. It just was. And yes, Finn Balor did bring the Demon. I think this was one of the times where the Demon felt like an external source. His entrance here was significantly different to his others in the past. Well, let's talk about the match. Kevin Owens wasn't really impressed with the entrance, and I remember enjoying this match. I was sick as hell and cold in the scorching summer, yet still found some joy in this match. The champion was taking more risks, jumping over the top rope, hitting drop kicks from the announce table, and even repeating the same moves, all to keep Kevin Owens down. These risks weren't really benefiting the champion much, and the way Balor was doing things, almost made him crash and burn hard, especially coupled with Owens' finisher being open at any type of moment, and he felt it. Owens even dropped Finn Balor on the apron with a powerbomb and had the title in sight. The champion showed great resiliency in the face of adversity, and Kevin Owens himself got so lost in the Destroy Owens Destroy motto that it cost himself badly, opening way for Finn Balor to retain the title. But he wanted to top the challenger and hit a coup de grace before climbing up and retrieving the belt. Great match. You can't really re-establish the ladder match. You just gotta do what you gotta do. What I mean is, the guys can choose their spots, take risks, but it's hard for this to stand out. I think that's why nobody talks about this ladder match, because if you've seen one, you basically seen all. Great match though. Balor returned to Full Sail on the September 2nd, 2015 episode of NXT, and he was inserted in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic tournament with Samoa Joe. He knew how important the NXT title was, but in the meantime was eager to win the tournament with the Prince. Tough challenge facing the Lucha Dragons in the first match, but they got through them and faced Enzo and Cass in the quarterfinal. The duo didn't cause too much problems, and Finn and Joe were cruising to the semifinal to face the Revival. This was around the time where the Revival was getting established. TakeOver Respect was where things were challenging, as the Revival was a tough challenge. First of all, I legitimately believed that Samoa Joe would turn heel here. It was way too obvious where they were going with this Balor and Joe story, because the biggest star in NXT other than Finn Balor was Samoa Joe. Hell, Samoa Joe was a bigger star than Finn Balor. Nobody else was close. It was only these two. Balor struggled in the match with the Revival. They were pure tag team, the type of tag team you'd see in the 80s. Dawson and Wilder targeted Balor's leg and isolated him away from Samoa Joe, who was energetic and ready to run in there and change the complexion of the match. The challenge wasn't too overwhelming, but Balor took a lot of damage. This set up a final against Baron Corbin and Rhino. This time around, Joe was struggling. Both men had the size on him, not to mention weren't as damaged as Joe and Balor were from the Revival tag team match. So when the NXT champion came into the match, it went from bad to worse. They fought through though and won the Dusty Rhodes tournament. Good match. A match with the American Alpha would have hit harder though, because that team was really popping at the time. They were a bit hot, and I personally would have preferred to see that. No problem though, this was decent, it was good. The family came in afterwards to honor the American Dream, and this ended up being Cody Rhodes' final appearance in WWE for 6.5 years. Stardust was still around though, but as Cody, he was away. Meanwhile, Apollo Crews won a battle royal to earn a title shot against the Prince. He was happy to face him and acknowledge that he'll be champion, just not next week. Apollo Crews at the time was a huge commodity. There was a lot of high hopes for him, and the November 4th, 2015 episode of NXT was when the match took place. Title match, so let's talk about it. Usually Finn Balor is the underdog in his big matches, but here that's an entirely different story. The champion was the aggressor and showed more wisdom and intensity than Apollo Crews. The challenger mostly relied on resiliency. He pushed and abused that to the point where he was frustrating Finn Balor. All of a sudden, Baron Corbin ran in and caused the DQ. It's a shame because the match was going good. Samoa Joe had to run in and make the save, only to drop Finn Balor himself, turning heel. He decimated the champion and dropped him with a muscle buster. Was this much needed? Not really, but the money was in Samoa Joe being a heel. It opened up a lot of possibilities for him. One of those was becoming the NXT champion. Over the past few months, he was in these dead-end feuds where he wasn't doing much and just coasting by. When Joe gave an explanation, it related to this. He said that he became Finn Balor's partner, carried him through the best that NXT had to offer, and they won the tournament. Yet when he asked for a title shot, Balor didn't care to give him a match and let him compete in a battle royal. The champion interrupted and stormed down to the ring ready to fight. The officials separated them and Joe found a way to deliver a cheap shot unlocking the coquina clutch. Balor was knocked out and was faced. A contract signing was held 2 weeks later with Balor telling Joe that he's not entitled to this title. This is NXT. You gotta fight for things. Joe quickly came out and signed before walking away. He did this to catch the champion off guard and attack him. Balor had more fight in him this time, but he was no match for Samoa Joe. He had Balor's number, and there was no doubt, especially after he won by submission in tag team action 2 weeks later. Strong build. It was a situation where Finn Balor was vulnerable. He hadn't encountered somebody like Samoa Joe who was unforgiving and intense. Yeah, there was Kevin Owens, but Joe was making him pass out and catching him off guard at every moment. Throughout this build, there wasn't a single moment where Finn Balor had one over Samoa Joe. Great stuff. It's different to the regular heel turns, this and that, oh, I hate you, Joe here wasn't afraid of Balor. He was using the mind games and sneak attacks as a way to get into his head. But he wasn't afraid of him. Joe was well aware of Balor bringing the demon, a way of becoming superhuman, but straight up said that it's just a piece of him. Unlike Balor, he's a monster. It was basically a necessity for Finn to channel the demon here because his regular self was unable to combat, let alone stop Samoa Joe. They gave the demon the supernatural element here because, as I said earlier, it was more war paint than an entirely different entity early on. Here, they acknowledged this version of Finn Balor as a true alter ego, and the main roster would follow up with this over the next couple of years. I like this example of booking the demon where Balor has to bring him. They didn't do it that much on the main roster. It was like, oh, I'm the demon now. With that said, the champion was more confident and aggressive than usual. At some points, he made Samoa Joe look like the underdog, until he ran into the Uranagi, and it was just Finn Balor with face paint. Bro was showing who the true demon was with the suicide dive. The match was picking up here. Joe's big weapon, the coquina clutch, wasn't working on the demon, and on this night, the coup de grace was enough for the victory. It made Joe look good in the sense of he had the champion, and even with the demon, he barely won. Great match. The true potential, though, was most definitely more than this. Fans expected a bit more. They thought there was just a little bit more these two had to offer, and on paper, it seemed like that was what was gonna happen. On this match, Finn Balor said that it was mentally draining and admitted that Samoa Joe was a monster. It was one of the toughest matches in his career, but he's still here. Apollo Crews, meanwhile, wanted to test himself. He wanted Finn Balor and a non-title match. It was a much tougher challenge this time around, and Apollo pushed the champion to the limit, but ultimately, same old story. However, Balor's method of winning involved debuting the 1916, a brutal spike DDT to score the victory. When I say debut, I mean debut as a finisher, because Balor had used this early on. He used it in New Japan as Bloody Sunday, even used it before in NXT, but he kind of went away for it for a while before actually using it as a finisher. This was also enough to earn the respect of Apollo Crews. The Prince was getting everyone's attention. Joe, Corbin, Zayn, they all wanted the title, and even Neville made a return to NXT to face the #1 guy. Neville was the aggressor for the most part during this match. He had the main roster boost. It's expected he'd dominate. Neville was shown to be one step ahead of Finn Balor and forced him to bring out the very best, to the point where the champion wasn't convinced that the coup de grace would be enough. So he brought out the 1916 again. Hard-fought battle, it was enjoyable, and every time a main roster wrestler visited NXT back then, it was always so cool, and I'm glad they started doing it again. Samoa Joe, meanwhile, beat Sami Zayn in an incredible 2 out of 3 falls match to earn the right to face Finn Balor at TakeOver Dallas for the NXT Championship. The build for their match was very, very light. When I mean light, I mean one segment in the lead-up type light. That was how NXT was doing things back then. Balor destroyed Rich Swann in a 4-minute match. He did get some offense in, but it was all the champion here. Samoa Joe, on the other hand, was causing chaos and sent Finn Balor a message. The champion saw very well how obsessed Samoa Joe is with winning the title, but also acknowledged that Balor's obsessions with being the very best will help him at TakeOver. Later that night, a brawl ensued between both men. They fought all over the arena. Balor was flying around. Sometimes Joe was throwing him around. Chaos all around, and this build desperately needed a moment like this. Balor had suffered an ankle injury right before these tapings, so I think that played a part in why the build was so light. About the match, let's talk about it. Now, at the time, I thought Samoa Joe was winning. He barely lost to the Demon. A rematch is happening, and the result has to be different, right? Especially because WrestleMania was in 2 nights, and after that, it's basically a new season for WWE, so perhaps Finn Balor would debut on the main roster. Oh, look, Bobby Roode. Great entrance by the Demon. Joe no-sells all of this and looks straight into the eyes of the champion. This match started off very hot with Joe being overwhelmed, but then he was busted open. And this changed the entire match. There was too much attention on his cut and it really hurt the match. Even then, the challenger was dominant. He seemed to once again overlook everything about the Demon and go back to work. As the match set in, Joe finally realized that he wasn't exactly dealing with Finn Balor, it was the Demon, but even then, still had enough in him to lock in the Coquina clutch and trap him. This was the moment. Ever since he came to NXT, anyone that was locked in the hold was done, yet Balor still found a way to roll over and steal a win. And this didn't even piss off Joe, the man was more upset. Good match. It's just unfortunate that there was a lot of stoppages. I enjoyed the story of the Demon finding struggle despite being this super dominant entity. It goes to show how strong Samoa Joe was in storyline. You know, they booked him very well to be this dominant heel. I loved it. It was kind of shocking to see him win here because I really thought he would go to the main roster. I thought that Demon surely had to lose here. It just made too much sense. It felt like the right time, but he didn't. Balor retained and moved on. In a surprise turn of events, Samoa Joe beat Finn Balor for the NXT Championship at a live event 2 weeks later. Well, actually 3 weeks later, I think. It was one of the most random things I've ever seen. Balor's reign ended at 287 days, and this made him the longest reigning NXT champion at the time. He returned about a month later to talk about it. He said that any of their matches could have gone either way before Elias Sampson interrupted. He trashed Balor, saying he's nothing without that title, and took a Pele kick. Balor beat him later that night and grabbed the mic. He admitted that Samoa Joe beat him, there's no doubt about it, but he wanted a rematch. His obsession with NXT and the championship was great, but admitted that he was possessed like a demon. The champion came out shouting he deserves nothing, and William Regal had enough of this, so he booked a steel cage match for TakeOver. Samoa Joe faces Finn Balor for the title. He was whining about fighting so hard to get this belt, and he was shut up. As heated as things were between the two, they managed to have a sit-down interview ahead of TakeOver. Balor expressed disappointment over his title reign ending on such a flat night. Joe felt entitled. The title belonged to him and still complained about how Balor was jumping around delaying title shots, and he was called out over this. The champion painted Balor as a selfish person, asking him to team up in the tournament, but afterwards starts stuttering when asked about a title shot. On the topic of friendship, Balor wanted to know what happened to that friend. He said that the title is the most important thing, and people talk about the future and how to risk to accept the challenge, but it's necessary. At the core of all of this, it comes down to friendship. Joe felt like he was wronged, he was petty here, was whining about how the title belonged to him, and I liked it. It was very different to their previous segments, you know, it just wasn't, oh, I'm gonna kick your ass, da 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 da. Joe was whiny here, it was a bit of a crybaby. I liked it. The steel cage match at TakeOver the end was good. Let's talk about it. Joe was the dominant one. He slowed down the pace and was having his way with Finn Balor, who couldn't string together something due to shortcomings. It took way longer for him to integrate into the match and do some real damage. Joe hits the muscle buster. It's still not enough for the victory, and the challenger starts finding form. Hits the coup de grace, almost escapes the cage, but Joe catches him and hits a super muscle buster to beat the Demon and retain the title. The way they treated Samoa Joe here was out of this world. Demon Finn Balor was about 99 overall, and Joe won it fair and square. The match itself didn't hit as hard as TakeOver London and Dallas. It's the weakest match in the trilogy for sure, but it was good. Joe came out of it looking amazing, and it seemed like Balor was on his way out. He came out on the June 15, 2016 episode of NXT to give an update on his status and future. The fans showered him in praises, chanting, "Thank you, Finn," and it really felt like a send-off. He said that NXT was in him. He lived and breathed NXT. Balor talked about his previous matches in the past and asked the question of what's next for Finn Balor. Balor Club chants intensified and lights went out. Shinsuke Nakamura was here. This guy was here for 2 minutes, yet everyone was dying for him, and just the thought of a potential match between the two sent these fans into a frenzy. Nakamura said that he wants him. He said that while Balor wasn't champion, he's still an icon, and said that if Nakamura wants to be champion, he has to beat an icon. He has to beat Finn Balor. The fans were dying at this point. The Prince's question was answered. Shinsuke Nakamura was what's next for Finn Balor. I remember this. I was hyped as hell to see these two face off, especially because of how hot Nakamura was back then. Now, I consider this a hidden gem. It really shouldn't be, but I never hear anybody talk about this match. I loved it back in 2016. It was exactly what I expected from these two, but what about now? They gave them a lot of time to do whatever they wanted, and one of the reasons why I think it's strange nobody talks about this match is because it's one of the biggest NXT matches in history. It's supposed to be more significant than it is. The match was even, not in the sense of back and forth, but when one guy dominated, the other would do the same a while later. Balor was shown to be more seasoned in this NXT main event situation though than Nakamura, and he targeted the knee and did a number on it. As time went on, Finn was the aggressor. They kicked into overdrive with Nakamura dropping the Prince with a Kinshasa, but he kicked out. Balor was hitting stuff as well and was starting to disbelieve what he was seeing, and this man was resilient, kicking out of everything, fighting back, and Nakamura managed to hit the Kinshasa to win the match. Amazing stuff. Nakamura used to wrestle with a little more intensity, especially in the final parts of the match back in NXT. He was younger back then, and he had a lot more to prove, which is not the same now, you know. We can't say the same right now about him. You know, things are different. But he was pretty damn exciting to watch, especially the final parts of the match. Great stuff. Balor hugged Nakamura, and he got the send-off that he wanted. From here, he went on to debut on the main roster as one of the first picks in the 2016 WWE Draft. He was drafted by Raw, and we all know the story. He became Universal Champion within a month. Of course, he got injured, which is unfortunate, but hey, that's impressive. It showed how much WWE was willing to invest in him in the beginning. But yeah, that's Finn Balor's NXT run. Overall, Finn Balor brought a high level of interest to NXT. Obviously, he wasn't the only one that played a part, but speaking for me personally, he really helped. Like, I was very interested in NXT the most when Finn Balor was at the helm, when he was on top. That was my favorite era, you know? I really liked this character and how he could switch between being this normal guy who was already a world-class wrestler to an alter ego of his who basically drives him to become the darkest version of himself. I really liked it. I thought it was cool, especially because nobody in the main roster had that. He had some great matches here, you know? Like, obviously the others would top his matches here, and he himself would have even better matches later on during his second NXT run. But here, when I look back on it from a 2015 perspective, he was incredible. 287 days on top, they booked him to be a great champion. He showed the leadership skills to lead NXT, which of course didn't really get a true chance to translate on the main roster because he was a bit watered down, and they also relied on the Demon a lot to help his stories, which I think is unfortunate. But yeah, that was great in NXT. My favorite match of his was probably his match with Shinsuke Nakamura. I remember enjoying it a lot back then, you know, like when I think about it, I had so much fun watching that match the day after. I remember I loved this, so yeah. Alright, what you guys think of Finn Balor's NXT run? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the 1916 on the like button and perhaps the coup de grace on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.